So we're about to get started. I asked you guys to fill out this questionnaire. So I'm just going to comment on it and then officially start, right? So we asked you to answer, who are you? What are some of the things you noticed, people, how they answered?
A lot of them were Lumen employees, I noticed.
Yeah, there were a lot of people who had no idea who they were.
Yeah, there were a few people that had no clue whatsoever. They was like, I don't know.
There was a lot of references to meat.
A meat bag. I saw a meat bag on there.
Someone put their age, I think.
Yeah, but our we're just essentially ageless here. Yeah.
So a lot of different ways people answered, who are you? Okay, so you guys are here for the talk, the you are, Severance and Theories of Personality. Thank you for coming. You might be asking yourselves, well, they just talked a lot, but who the heck are they? Who am I? Who are you? I know that we are employees here at LumenCon. And I know that my name is Britty F and that I'm a severed employee here at LumenCon. But besides that, I don't really know who I am. Do
Yeah.
you know who I am?
Actually, I do know a little bit about who you
Oh,
are.
thank goodness.
So your Audi is a physician assistant. Your Audi has a certificate of added qualification in psychiatry.
Mm.
Your Audi works at Grady's med psych unit, which is the only med psych unit in the state of Georgia. Yeah, yeah, right. Um, your Audi has no financial disclosures.
That's important.
Please try to enjoy
We'd like to
it.
get paid, but
Yeah,
I
please.
guess it's good.
Um, and your Audi has actually done six previous talks like this at DragonCon. Are you? Can you speak to that at all?
You know what? I felt kind of nauseous when I woke up this morning. I must be going through reintegration,
Yeah.
and I do have that knowledge available to me. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this is my seventh talk here for the science track. Normally, I couple like something in pop culture with some sort of mental health concept. So, and this is actually my second talk on severance. The first one was on severance and job satisfaction.
Yeah. And I'm Danny E, and I don't know anything about my Audi. I do know that my Audi was at Alderaan last night, right before it blew up. And it was having a really great time, but that's about all I know. Do you know anything about me?
I do. I have a list of facts about your Audi right here, actually. Your Audi is a licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as a licensed professional counselor.
Mm.
Please try to enjoy all facts equally. Your Audi is a manager. Oh wait, your Audi's a manager at Grady? At Grady's Crisis Center?
Do you think our Audis work together?
Why are Audis
I don't
working?
know. Why?
That's weird. Your Audi owns a private practice in Midtown. That's 10 points deducted. Your Audi is an active, oh wait, your Audi is active in mental health advocacy here in the state of Georgia.
Mm.
And one final fact.
Mm-hmm.
Your Audi is a mediocre base.
Okay, so who here has not seen Severance? Okay, so just fair warning, you guys. There will be spoilers for both seasons of Severance today. So just be warned if you're not interested in it at certain points, just plug your ears. Oh.
So
Okay.
So we've set ourselves some objectives, which we're going to share with you. First, we're going to review the premise of severance.
We're going to define what personality is.
We're going to introduce the field of personality psychology.
We're going to explore some theories of how personality forms.
We're going to attempt to define Severance's theory of personality.
And then we're going to give you some time for questions and answers.
You might be asking yourself, okay, that's nice, but why should I care? Like, what do I get out of sitting here for an hour? Well, you might be wondering, will I learn who I am? Will you learn who you are? And I don't know. Probably not. I don't think so, actually. That's a really high bar, and I don't think we're going to meet it.
You might learn a little bit about why you are the way you are.
Hmm. And you'll definitely learn how mental health professionals, such as Dan and myself, how we view the world in the lens of personality.
Yeah, and I think that the show is a really fun way to look at psychology, and psychology is a really fun way to look at the show.
So to go over Severance, just like quick run through for those of you who haven't seen it or haven't seen it in a while. Severance is on Apple TV. It was created by showrunner Dan Erickson. There are 2 seasons. A lot of the episodes are directed by Ben Stiller. He's also an executive producer. It takes place at a corporation called Lumen. And it centers on 4 main protagonists, Mark S., Helly R., Irving B., Dylan G., all of whom are refiners for the company. They have all undergone the procedure colloquially known as severance, which spatially dictates where they have access to their memories. So when they are on the basement floor, or what we thought was the basement floor of Lumen, they only have access to their work memories, forming their any identity. And then once they are outside of Lumen, out in the world, living their personal life, access to those memories are separate, and that is their outing. The very first words of the very first episode of the very first season is a question. Who are you? And this is important because Dan Erickson, that showrunner that I mentioned, he has said that question, who are you, is essentially the central thesis of the show. And when we realized that, that's kind of what got us interested in making this talk, because there is another group of people who like to question, who are you? Do you guys have a guess for what type of person that is? It is a psychologist, a specific type of psychologist, a personality psychologist. I mean, any mental health worker, but the researchers are personality psychologists. So,
So, Brittany, what is personality
oh
psychology?
my gosh, I'm so glad you
Yes,
asked.
I do.
So, personality psychology is a branch of psychology. It seeks to describe how a personality develops, what traits make up a personality, how, as researchers specifically, one would assess personality traits. And then once you have that information, what can you do with it? Like, what real world applications does knowing how personality develops and what traits comprise of a personality, like how does that help people live in the real world? But that begs the question, what is personality?
Yeah, I think I can say something about that.
Awesome.
So, personality is a pattern of behaviors and traits that characterize adaptations and responses to the responses of our lives. It's like the way that we think about ourselves, like, are we confident or lacking confidence? How do we relate to people? Are we like reserved or outgoing? And how do we interpret and deal with events in the environment? We start to see some traits begin to appear in childhood. Like you might see some kiddos be extroverted while some are introverted. But from a diagnostic perspective, our field doesn't really start to appraise or analyze traits until about middle adolescence or about age 16. Personality traits are also commonly understood to be largely settled around the age of 30. And we generally assume those traits remain relatively consistent throughout one's lifetime. But this does not mean that personality cannot be changed at all, especially given our growing understanding of our brain's ability to change throughout our lifetime. There's a concept we know as neuroplasticity that we're learning that personality, because of that, we're learning like personality is never really set in stone. Taking that into mind, it stands a question like, how old are the innies? So shout it out to me real quick. Like, how old do you think the innies are? 2, 5, 30, right? 7? Yeah, right? So how old? 2 going on 30. Yeah, generally, yeah. So even Mark S. mentions in the show that he sees himself as only like 2 to 3 years old. He probably hasn't thought much about it, but we have to ask that question in our talk because if the innies are only like 2 to 3 years old, we can't really discuss their personalities. So for our conversation, because of the way that we see the innies engage, it stands to reason that they are at least adolescents, maybe at 16 going on 30 instead of 2 going on 30, but I think that's a great place to land. And since we've talked about what personality is, we should also mention what personality is not. Personality is not like issues or problems, like it's not a personality disorder. It's not mood, like a sustained emotional state. It's not affect, like our observable expression of like, mood. It's not drives like hunger, sex, or success. And it's not behaviors better explained by other mechanisms like addiction. For instance, there's no research-backed evidence of a concept of an addictive personality. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of like type A or type B personalities. Right. So many people have heard, right? Like type A is considered more driven and type B is more passive. And these concepts and others have really become dated. They're not really supported in the research. They have been replaced by better research, more validated concepts. So we're not going to include outdated concepts like that either. Personality is also not it's not personhood. The concept of personhood is the concept of the validity and value of our existential humanness. And of course, you would hear a therapist talk about that, right? With rights, autonomy, and intrinsic worth. Personality is definitely a theme in the show. Like Helly says specifically, that they're not persons, they're just animals. While other people in the show argue that they're 100% distinct and unique individuals. And that's true about the show. We're just not going to address personhood in our talk. So Britty, all of this talk about personality makes me wonder, really, how does personality develop?
I'd love to talk about that.
Please.
So we're going to talk about how personality develops on a timeline, take you through sort of some of the historical thoughts about it, starting in ancient times, and then moving up to more present ways of thinking about it. All of them, though, are relevant today, except for one. We're going to start off with the concept of the soul and just briefly touch on that because that isn't necessarily something that personality psychologists are thinking about. It's more of a religious or spiritual sort of question. But I wanted to bring it up because it is specifically addressed in the show. Specifically, Fields, Bert's husband, says that he had been talking to his pastor, and his pastor said that innies are complete individuals with souls. And I think that the concept of the soul is one of our earlier explanations of why a person is who they are. Moving on to humoral theory, this was talked about around 400 BC. This is the only theory I'm going to talk about that doesn't really have any relevance today, but it's still important. You'll see why. So Hippocrates, who here has heard of Hippocrates? And what is the oath named after him? Hippocratic oath. Because he's the father of medicine, exactly. So Hippocrates was a Greek philosopher. He's the father of medicine, responsible for a lot of concepts that we still practice in medicine today, like differential diagnosis, prognosis, and the Hippocratic oath. He described a humoral theory, which is now defunct. But basically, that theory said that we have these four bodily humors and that these substances are in our body. And depending on how much or how little, that leads to four temperaments, which is essentially four personalities. So the blood humor can lead to a sanguine temperament or an optimistic personality. The black bile humor can lead to a melancholic or analytical temperament or personality. Yellow bile to choleric or ambitious, and phlegm to phlegmatic or calm. What does that remind you of? Within the show of Severance. Anybody? The four tempers. Thank you so much. So the whole time I was using the word temperament, I was not referring to tempers, but now I will. So in the show of Severance, there are the four tempers. And I think that these actually kind of correlate. So the sanguine temperament sort of correlates to the temper of frolic or joy, melancholic to woe. They both have to do with sadness or depression. choleric to malice, both having to do with like hot-temperedness or hostility. And then the final one, they don't really relate. So we have phlegm being indifferent, and then they have dread, but dread or fear would actually have been caused by the humor of black bile. So, in a nutshell, humoral theory says that personality is comprised of a balancing of the humors. And in the world of severance, it's the taming of the tempers. Moving on to psychoanalytic theory, this was first talked about in the 1900s. And who is like the father of this theory? Freud. What else is he the father of? Yes. So Freud is a big part of our cultural lexicon, things like Oedipus complex, repressed memories. This is all Freud. Freud also described the psychic determinism, which is often depicted as an iceberg. Basically, this theory says that our personality is comprised of our active thoughts and perceptions that we're aware of, but also deep below the surface. So you can see the iceberg, but there's a whole lot below. And those things are unconscious to us, but are also driving who we are and how we act in the world. So in a nutshell, psychoanalytic theory says that personality is comprised of conscious and unconscious drives. And I think that this is relevant to the show because we actually do see depictions of icebergs, specifically in Milchek's office on his wall. I don't think that this is a coincidence because there's a lot of imagery, especially in the opening scenes, of sort of like diving into the depths of our mind, which is what Freud attempted to do in psychoanalytic therapy. But so perhaps what the makers of Severance are trying to do, maybe what they're saying is that our conscious selves are sort of like our outie identity or our outie persona. So what does that mean is below the surface, like in the severed floor? Well, perhaps once we are severed, that unlocks our unconscious mind. Maybe our outies are actually these unconscious drives and instincts that we weren't aware of. So just as an example of that, Helena Egan, she's kind of like an uptight, repressed sort of individual. Her father looked for the fire of Keir in her, could not find it, but severed the same person, and all of a sudden there's that fire he had been looking for all along. Is that because the severance procedure unlocked this unconscious drive that she had been repressing? Perhaps. Moving on to behaviorism. So behaviorism is like classical conditioning. Who here has heard of Pavlov's dog? Yeah, Psychology 101, right? So in a nutshell, Pavlov took a dog, he fed it. When you feed any animal, it'll naturally just start to salivate to get ready to eat. But at the same time that he would feed the dog, he would ring a bell. And every single time he fed the dog, he rang the bell. Eventually, he could just ring the bell and the dog would still salivate because it was expecting food. The next step up from classical conditioning is operant conditioning. So that was Skinner and the cat. But what this is basically rewards and punishments. So you take a person, you reward them with something that they find rewarding. And if you couple that with this reward is for this behavior, you'll continue to see the behavior. And we know that Lumen loves operant conditioning. So there are all sorts of prizes for good behavior, erasers, finger traps, caricatures, melon parties, free waffle party, egg bar socials, waffle parties, music dance experiences, on and on we go. But there's also the opposite side in operant conditioning, which is punishment. So you take a behavior that you do not like and you punish it, and therefore you deter future behavior. So in a nutshell, behaviorism says that personality is made up of behaviors encouraged by rewards and discouraged by punishments.
So that we've learned a lot so far.
Mm.
You know, I think it's time that we have a break. I think we deserve one.
Like in the break room?
No, oh, God, no, not that kind of break, please.
Mm.
A different kind of break.
Oh, like break time?
Yeah, like break time.
All right, everyone, get up. We're doing a stretch break. And if Ed right there likes your dance moves, you will be rewarded with either I don't know, eggs or waffles. Yeah.
It's your very own music dance experience.
Welcome to the first ever choreography in Meredith Falls. All right, everyone, sit down. I'm confident that Ed loved everyone's dance moves because I saw them and they were very spectacular
So
and
great.
definitely deserve to be rewarded. So just, make sure you get his attention
Yeah.
because I mean, eggs and waffles, come on.
Eggs and waffles on a Sunday morning. What's better? Come on. Okay, so we're going to move along in our timeline. We're going to talk about social learning theory and cognitive theories of personality development. These grew out of the limits of behaviorism and attempted to explain things behaviorism could not. Social learning theory is essentially learning by watching or imitating others. One example I think of from the show is James and Helena. We know that Heliar, Helena's innie, has a fiery core. But Helena appears to have learned to present other traits from what was apparently modeled by her dad and her family, such as coldness, exacting decisions, adherence to dogma. As we layer on cognitive theory over social learning, we see that imitation is built from first interpreting what we see and what was modeled for us, then believing that as some level of truth, creating some sort of understanding of that experience internally, and then integrating that understanding into our lives and behaviors. A lot of that's done subconsciously. Our models for learning can include generally people, um, like our parents, our grandparents, our friends. Persistent experiences like school. Like we learn so much by imitating things that we see at school. Trauma, moral or ethical education, like religion or going to church, and exposure or lack of exposure to a broader range of experiences. So we learn in some like personality according to social learning and cognitive theory as a result of observation plus reenactment. Moving into the 1980s, we see that personality theory becomes more focused on biology and genetics. This theory is developed from our ballooning understanding of the body in the last century and explains that our personality is the result of traits that we inherit from our parents and ancestors through the passing on of our genes. So passing on genes, not imitating, right? And genes, real quick, are the biological instructions for how our bodies function and sometimes the way they look, and they've shaped who we are through the evolutionary process. Biology theory also looks at the physical structure of the brain and how it communicates with the body. And when I talk about the structure of the brain, I'm talking about things like lobes and sections and systems, like the frontal lobe, which is responsible for critical thinking tasks. And then the limbic system is in the middle of the brain, which is responsible for emotion and memory, or the hindbrain, which is responsible for and governs survival. Now, I don't expect you guys to remember all of these terms, but I just say these things just to acknowledge that the structure of our brain and the systems are very important for and play different parts in our personality development. Digging a little bit deeper into the brain, we find that there's this concept of neurocognitive development, which is the process by which our brains learn to think and remember and solve problems as we grow. And that's actually very fundamental to our personality development. Two key components of the neurocognitive development are neurons, which are special cells that are used in our bodies and brains to send and receive messages through our brains and body. And then those neural pathways. Neural pathways are like chains of neurons that carry those messages. These neural pathways become more efficient the more that they're used and activated through repeated experiences. So a way that I like to think about it is neurons that fire together, wire together. So the more that they use certain pathways, the stronger that they get. And as a result, many of our personality traits develop subconsciously. The neurocognitive system or development system is also the system that allows for neuroplasticity. Now, you guys heard me mention that word before, and that's basically just a word we use to describe how our brain is able to grow and change throughout our entire lifetime. Um, so, in some, like biology and genetic theory says that personality is a result of genes and evolution and brain structure and neurocognitive development. Very simple. Right. Um, I think this is rather influential in the show. Like in the second season, Gemma is put into situations her innie has no explicit memory of, but still might have strong neural connections because of like unsevered subconscious neural pathways. So I wonder, like, if Lumen was testing the effects of the severance procedure on those neural pathways. I got somebody over here nodding his head. He's like, "Yeah, that's what I think too. That's great." Um, it's always nice to have somebody agree with me, you know. Um, we also see the importance of neural pathways again when we see Gemma's innie take Mark's hand despite not knowing who he was. Like, even while there was somebody on the intercom saying, like, he's dangerous, don't go with him. And this may explain why Jane was so angry when Gemma actually went with Mark, you know, it probably was like a failure to him. So stepping into the 1990s, we encounter postmodern theories of development, and most prominently the narrative constructivist theory. This theory contends that humans are inherently meaning makers, and we make sense of our world through language and narrative. In this theory, personality develops as a result of increasing self-awareness and a definition of self-image. Development is driven by the narrative we write about experiences and the meaning that we place on those experiences over time. And as a result, the self-image we develop through our narrative influences how we choose to express ourselves. Or put another way, we construct our own reality and subsequently express ourselves out of that construction. Well, that's a lot. So in a nutshell, narrative constructivist theory says that personality is the result of self-narrative plus the meaning of experiences. And we find a narrative influenced personality all over the show. I had to cut down so many examples because there are just so many. And for instance, like the similarities between Mark S. And Mark Scout could be attributed to their shared neurocognitive, you know, their subconscious connections, but their differences can likely be attributed to their divergent narrative constructions. Like I wonder if Mark Scout is more jaded or irritable than Mark S because of his loss of Gemma. And that loss is not a narrative that Mark S shares with him. We also see innies appear to become more self-aware, seeing themselves increasingly as individuals with valuable experiences and choices. Like Dylan G is a self-assured badass, right? On the seventh floor, right? And he's that in the absence of his outies narrative as a fuck up, right? We also see Dylan's narrative and personality shift some as he finds out that his outie has kids, and those kids become a part of his narrative as an innie as well. And then there's Helly, right, whose fire as an innie is not suppressed by the needs of the company or the narrative of who Helena is as an Egan. So here again is our timeline of models. We've gone through them pretty quickly, but I'm afraid we may have left one out, Britty.
I was just thinking the same thing. Oh my gosh,
Sorry.
I forgot trade theory.
Yeah, trade theory.
Wow. It wasn't pre-planned at all.
Oh, no.
So trade theory, unlike some of these other theories we just talked about, it doesn't really care about why. It doesn't talk about the development of personality. It just cares about developing an inventory of traits. And we're very familiar with this in pop culture because that's essentially what personality quizzes are trying to get at, right? So you answer a bunch of questions about yourself, and then that can tell you which department in Lumen should you work in, which cult in Dragon Con should you join, right? Which Avenger are you? But the other inventories of traits you might be familiar with are Myers-Briggs. Shout out, do you know your Myers-Briggs?
Yeah.
What are you? Wow, a lot of INTJ. Okay.
Wow.
Are you an INTJ?
No, no.
Oh. I'm an ENFP.
I'm an ENFJ.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Or who's heard of an Enneagram? You know your number?
One.
Lots of fours here.
My therapist did tell me what my number was, but I forgot. And then there's the big five, which we actually are going to delve into a little bit deeper. But just first, trait theory in a nutshell says that personality is I like lost my word, summary. It's a constellation of traits. Thank you.
Yeah.
So the reintegration sickness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes words leave me. But yeah, so we're going to talk about the big five a little bit more. It's also called the five-factor model because there's five personality traits that it describes. It's also called OCEAN because that actually spells out the acronym, the first letter of each of the traits. And the reason why we want to talk about it a little bit is because it is widely used, it's evidence-based, it's validated, meaning that it has been proven to describe what it is seeking to describe, and it is reliable across groups, meaning that we know that if we give this inventory, that it's going to consistently give us the same results. Okay. Can you tell us a little bit more about the big five?
Yeah, so very briefly, the five traits are openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. These traits exist on a two-sided spectrum, and they're positive traits to each side of the spectrum. Real quick question, you can just shout it out to me, like, is neuroticism typically considered good or bad? But yeah, that's pretty universal, right? Yeah. But it also has its good qualities. For example, high neuroticism, yeah, could be considered better self-awareness or just better situational awareness about your surroundings, or thoughtfulness of consequences. It's not just anxiousness. What about openness? Is openness considered good or bad? Good. So having low openness would be bad, right? Yeah. But low openness is not always bad. It could indicate like pragmatism or fidelity to data.
So one inventory we can use to assess the big five is the TIPI, or the 10-item personality inventory. This is just a very quick survey. It assesses each of the five traits on a two-ended spectrum, meaning like how much of a trait do you have, how little of a trait do you have. It's just 10 questions, and you answer each question on a 7-point scale, with 1 being that you strongly disagree with this statement, all the way up to 7 being that you strongly agree with the statement. And we're actually going to go through a TIPI right now. So if you didn't close out your phone, the next question is automatically going to pop up, but you can also scan the QR code again. And to go through the TIPI, we as a group are going to select one refiner that we want to do the TIPI on. So I'm going to see each of their names and just quickly raise your hand, and then I'll tell you to put it down. So you're voting on which refiner you want to go through the TIPI on. Who wants to do the TIPI on Mark S? No one? Who? Boring.
Nobody.
Who wants to do it on Helly R? All right, a couple of votes. Who wants to do it on Irving B? Okay, more. Who wants to do Dylan G? I think that's Irving.
I think it is.
All right, that's so funny. All right, so we're going to do it on Irving B. So, yeah, go ahead and scan the QR code. We're going to go through these pretty rapid fire after the first question, but just to explain how this is going to go, there's going to be 10 questions and there's a little blank space. So it's Irving B sees themselves as extroverted, enthusiastic. Irving sees themselves as extroverted, enthusiastic. And I forgot to pay attention to how many people were here, but maybe I'll wait until 30 people.
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
And just go with your gut reaction, put yourself in Irving's shoes, and try to figure out what you might think that he would answer this.
So we're gonna go through these much quicker now. Moving on, Irving sees themselves as critical, quarrelsome. Irving is the any.
So it's
Irving B, sorry.
So it's how he sees himself, not how we see him. Right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. I'm gonna call it a 6.
Okay.
Irving sees themselves as dependable, self-disciplined. That's a 7. Irving sees himself as anxious, easily upset. That's a 5. Irving sees themselves as open to new experiences, complex. That's a 3. Irving sees themselves as reserved, quiet. That's a 6. Irving sees themselves as sympathetic, warm. That's a 4. Irving sees themselves as disorganized, careless. Well, that's a 7. That's a 1. Irving sees themselves as calm, emotionally stable. That's a 6. Irving sees themselves as conventional, uncreative. Wow. Wow. What happened?
Wow.
Okay, that's a 4.
So,
All right.
there.
So, Dan has been taking note of what everyone voted, and actually, Danny
Danny
E. Not to get it
Yeah,
confused.
yeah.
We had met before, went through the tippy, rated each of the refiners separately, and then came to a consensus. So this is what Danny E and I rated Irving B as.
Yeah.
So just kind of doing it side by side, it looks like we rated Irving B in extroversion a 1, and the majority of those in attendance rated him a 2.
A 2, yeah.
Agreeableness, we were a 1.5. The majority of y'all were a 3. We rated him a 7 out of conscientiousness.
And y'all did the same. Yeah.
A 6 in emotional stability.
And we y'all did 4.5, so it's not too far off. Yeah.
And then finally, openness. I think this is our biggest difference. We rated him a 1.5, and the majority of you rated him a 3.5.
So we're all kind of in agreement that he's kind of low on openness, but we thought he was a little bit lower on openness.
Well, well, maybe there was also kind of a difference in emotional stability too. But I am just curious to hear from someone in the audience who thought that Irving, I see you were like, if you thought he was more open than we do. Can you speak to that? Thank you so much.
I am very open. He explored and found Bert. That was my whole reason not to be that low.
Yeah.
I also was more in the 3 range. I think go better than 4, but yeah. He found Bert and then he became more open. So
Yeah.
that was my thought.
Cool. And we're gonna have more time for Q&A, but did you want to speak to just kind of why we rated him lower?
Yeah, I think we rated him kind of low because he was so dogmatic. And I think he found some safety in adhering to the Lumen philosophy, and it was very hard for him to kind of get out of that. And obviously we saw that he eventually did.
We didn't really give him enough credit for the changes he made, I think.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, but this sort of begs the question, because we had questions about how do we answer it, how we see him, how he sees himself. But is this rating that we just did of Irving be even valid? No, it's not. Because the Tippy is actually designed to be a self-rated scale. So this would only be valid if Irving B, the fictional character, rated it. And he was sadly not available.
We tried, but he was expensive.
John Turturro, yeah. It's like, come on. So Danny E, you already told us that personality definitely can change, but I was wondering, how can personality change?
Well, my clearly my Audi is a bit biased, and
Mm.
he would say that therapy is a sound strategy. Therapy is not just for severe dysfunction. It's not for just wanting to change doesn't mean that you are experiencing diagnosable disorder, or that there is necessarily something wrong with you. There's tons of reasons why a person might want to go to therapy. And one of those might be to deal with personality issues, right? Or personality experiences. And I thought it might be fun to think really quickly about a character from the show, and what would happen to them if they went to therapy. And so I thought of Irving B. So clearly we're all in the same wavelength here. So let's just say Irving B is low in openness, right? How serendipitous that we talk about this, right? And then he notices that limits him from developing deep friendships and with his coworkers. And just for the sake of imagination, let's imagine that Irving went to a therapist on the lemon floor to help him identify his barriers to openness and ways to develop more openness in his personality. We could see that if that were the case, when he meets Bert, he might be more open to that relationship, and he might also be able to gain new perspective on the company of Lumen. So not only can personality traits be addressed in therapy, but there are also therapeutic models that incorporate concepts of personality in their theory of struggle. And one of those is a model that is recently popular called internal family systems. Has anybody ever heard of IFS before? Yeah, a good number of people. Yeah, absolutely. In IFS, the key concept is that a person is defined as a system of inner parts, like a family within the mind. Each part has unique feelings and functions and purposes that persist and surface based on current experiences. And this is not like complete personalities. This is different parts of your core self that are present. Internal conflict in this model is the result of conflict between those inner parts. And the goal of therapy is to identify the core self, and foster healing and integration of all the parts. And I just love the idea of integration. Thanks. So I thought of IFS immediately when I saw Innie Mark and Outie Mark conversing and arguing through videotape in the birthing cabin. Both of them had legitimate needs, and they were trying to understand each other and come to some agreement. And they both wanted validation of those needs, and they tried to negotiate for that. I think we're coming to the end of our time here. And I'm actually really looking forward to the question and answer.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we might need to come back to this question though before we end. Like, what is Severance's theory of personality?
So like when they ask the question, who are you? Like, wait, but who am I?
Are you expecting me to answer that?
Yeah, who am I and why?
I'm not gonna answer that.
Okay.
I can't even answer that.
Really need to know.
I don't think the show actually ends up answering that question very well. But I do think it does a good job of exploring that question in many ways, showing us that there's like not a single theory that can completely account for personality development.
So we didn't get to answer, in a very pretty bow what Severance's theory of personality is, but we do hope that you have some takeaways from today. Specifically, we hope that, that you may or may not know who you are.
That's okay.
But it is, I promise you,
It
it is 100% okay.
Absolutely.
Who you are can be defined in many ways.
And who you are is valid.
And if there are aspects of your personality that you would like to change, you can. So these are our references. We actually want to thank some of our friends who are in the audience today who watched our talk and let us practice for them. They all chose Irving B as well. So we never rehearsed any other character because no one cares.
100%.
But we'll get into the Q&A if you want to pass the mic. But where can people find my Outie, Danny?
So, Britty, your Outie can be found on Instagram at Ms_leisure. Or if you scan that QR code, you can find a link tree of all Brittany's creative projects and pictures, and you can even find links to all of her previous talks And if you're interested in doing the tippy on yourself, you can go there and check it out. Yeah.
We'll also upload this talk
Oh yeah.
on
that's
there as
right.
well.
Mhm.
And to continue the conversation with Danny E, you can reach him on his email, dan@familytherapy.org. That is also a website, atlantafamilytherapy.org. And then we have our QR codes that we'll leave up. And with that, we're ready for our first question.
Hey there. In regards to, we see a major change in regards to the introduction of Rickens' book, The Unit of You. What would be the influence of this as part of the personality growth, being an external catalyst?
I think I need more context for the
Yeah.
question.
It's, how does it reflect what we were discussing for personality growth? Like, there was a discussion of that was already there within them,
Mhm.
but also these new ideas landed and caused like a revolution or rebellion.
Oh,
So
like, so if I understand your question, you're talking about the book, The You Are, how they found it and they had all of this growth, and you're wondering like, how does that apply to sort of what we were talking about within our talk? Do you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I would think about is it helped them probably start developing their own self-narrative. They got to see themselves as persons. They got to see themselves reflected in other things, and they started to keep track of certain behaviors and experiences that that became more meaningful to them, and that meaning motivated other behaviors.
And then what I'll add is that Dan Erickson, the creator, has spoken about this specifically. He said that season one was basically the innies trying to answer for themselves, who, like, am I a person? And then season two, they were like, yes, okay, but if I am a person separate than my outie, who am I? And then
Yeah.
add on what Dan said.
I've always heard that and this is maybe a cynical thing, the personality tests and other stuff are used more as a hiring practices to limit like very cynical like use case. This is the first I've heard of the T. How does that well, is that in general the case? And if so, how does the Tippy differ from that in its use?
I'll take a stab at it first if you want to add. So I think that if current companies are still using the Myers-Briggs, I really don't think any mental health professional would be on board with that. I mean, I don't know I know that I ever tried to get a job at Urban Outfitters and they had some weird personality test that I did not pass, but I think that the more accepted version in workspaces is the Big Five. And yeah, you love the Big Five. Do you want to comment on that?
Well, I like the Big Five because there's just a lot more research. It's been validated across people groups. It's been validated multiple times, whereas the Myers-Briggs is really kind of pigeonholed to one kind of people group. It was never been revalidated over time. It's fun. I think there's some, value to it. It's a great way to kind of like get a 30,000-foot overview. But if you're really looking to really start to identify more solid personality traits, I don't think it's the greatest place to go. And so, if companies are using it or if therapists are using it, I mean, as long as we're not basing huge decisions on it, I mean, it's still can be useful. It's just not as useful as the Big Five.
I think that mostly these should be used just to get an understanding of yourself. I can't really say that I'm on board with like companies being like, oh, well, we only want people high in openness and then like not train people, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like people can be trained.
Yeah.
You just have to put in time and effort.
And the Tippy, again, is only like a very short self-report survey. There are other surveys that can be administered by therapists, psychologists that are more extensive and give you, deeper insight about the Big Five. The Tippy we gave to you guys just so that you guys can have an experience with the Big Five.
Have you thought about what context Harmony Cobell would have or what the context of Harmony Cobell in this discussion would be?
We did think about including Harmony Cobell specifically in the part about social cognitive learning, and just like how, because part of the idea with that is just like who is modeling the traits that you end up displaying in the world and like informing how you interact with the world. And we did get to see like a part of her upbringing and where she grew up in poverty in this like town that guess you get the sense that like it was very pro Lumen, everything surrounded Lumen. So that was one way we thought about including Harmony, but did not.
So diving a little bit into the interpretation of inner versus outer mind, we see that the innies are starting to connect a little bit with their outies personality, but how is it that we might be able to see the outies dive into their subconscious and connect with their innies? Think like meditation, the hypnosis, things like that.
I love that question. I think that you might like have hit the nail on the head with season 3, because I think you're right. Like season 2, we start to see, or maybe from the beginning, right? Innies have this, they're sort of told that they're there to serve their outies. And what we need to see now, what we saw Mark S or Mark Scout do with Mark S in that sort of IFS sort of dialogue was be really discounting of him, right? And talking to him like he's a child and being like, oh, you'll learn one day when you really know what love is, you know? So we do need to see, I think, for some sort of resolution that would feel good to me anyways, we need to see some of that. But how would it take place? Like their hypnosis, or I don't know, maybe they could do the video camera thing again, or do you have any ideas?
You know, I was actually thinking that because Severance is a thing, that a lot of people, a lot of the outies that may not even care about diving into their inner self or connecting with their innies, for the very reason that they chose to sever in the first place. So if we do see that, I don't know how they might do that, but I think that'll be interesting.
I guess we also saw Helly like walk in the shoes of her innie. I didn't think about that, but
Yeah.
it's an interesting question.
Hi, so I know there's like a whole discussion on personality with like nature versus nurture and things like that, but obviously the innies are like born with a lot of basic knowledge and a lot of basic understanding of function and like just very intrinsic knowledge how that works because they're already obviously adults in the real world. How much does that influence the development of their personality as innies?
Sorry, can you say that last part?
Yeah, the last part again.
How much would that influence the development of their personality with their innies?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that. So I think when we were writing this and thinking about what is the severance procedure, it seems like perhaps what the severance procedure does is it makes it so that certain facts are still like there, but there's lack of access to other things. How would that happen on a brain level? I don't know. But so that's why we also think that they couldn't be literally 2, right? They have way more neural connections, whether or not they have access to the memories of that or not. I don't know if I'm like straying away from the question, but yeah, I don't know if I strayed too far away from the question. Did you want to try and?
Sure. I think that the show doesn't really address it head on, but when an innie is born, created, right? Like their bodies still function like normal bodies, and so they're gonna go through some level, regardless of what theory you decide to follow, right? Or say is governing it. Like they're gonna follow some level of personality development. And that personality development, because of the underpinning of the biological structure of our brain and how all of that works, is actually going to affect not only their lives as innies, but the lives as outies as well. I think about like, I wonder what kind of blowback outies got or felt after somebody went to the break room, you know?
So one of the more memorable panels on personality and personhood at Dragon I've been at talks about in early sci-fi, we thought the self was the collection of memories. In more recent sci-fi, we think the self is defined by a collection of preferences. And that's usually expressed in the body swap episode of every sci-fi show ever. As an innie, what would need to be transferred to another innie for the Severance body swap episode?
I think, like, haven't we already kind of seen a body swap episode? Like with Helena, right? So I don't know how to answer that question other than like that was an intentional thing that Helena did to kind of see what, live life as an innie and deceive people. Other than that, I don't know. What about you?
I don't know. Come and talk to me after. I want to know
Yeah.
your answer.
Yeah, we can go deeper there.
There isn't an addictive personality.
Mm.
How would you, how are behavioral addictions understood in the context of contemporary personality theory? I'm thinking of like gambling addiction or being a workaholic. How is that understood?
Well, this is Dan's little passion thing. Maybe I'll comment too, but you go.
Oh, you have anything to say?
Well, I'll just say personality is a constellation of behaviors. So I think when Dan said, personality there isn't an addictive personality. I think what he was really emphasizing is that we understand addiction through biology, right? It's like a reward system, dopamine pathway. But that doesn't mean that we're saying like, personality is comprised of your thoughts and behaviors, but not your addictive behaviors. Like, it just means that addiction is driven by biology.
Yeah. I'd also say that a lot of times people will say, well, I have an addictive personality, and it's kind of like self-disparaging in a way. Just say like, oh, well, I'm just prone to not being able to do X, Y, or Z, or prone to this kind of behavior because that's just part of my personality. And again, there's no evidence for that. And I think that also speaks poorly of us as human beings that we're just prone to be addicted, or you're prone to be addicted but I'm not. Like I think that or vice versa. I think that we all have the same neurocognitive developmental functions going on, and so we're all generally susceptible to addiction in the same ways. You're not like you don't have a personality trait that makes you more prone to addiction than another human being.
I've heard of multiple personality like disorder. How realistic is it for one person to have two different personalities that are compartmentalized and distinct?
How realistic is that the question? Well, dissociative identity disorder is the official name nowadays. It was ever called multiple personality disorder a few diagnostic statistical manuals back. And that is a real thing. I actually did a talk on dissociative identity disorder. So if you scan the QR code with Moon Knight, and I go really in depth into it, but I'll just say that dissociative identity disorder is a real thing. I don't think that that's what's portrayed in Severance. And then how likely is it for people to have two distinct personalities? In actuality, in dissociative identity disorder, it's not like they show it in the movies. People can have distinct personalities, but sometimes it's not like clear cut. Sometimes multiple personalities are at the forefront at the same time. Sometimes it's nuanced, and yeah, I definitely encourage you to watch the video where I'm more articulate and
After you've done all the reading.
not going through reintegration sickness.
Last question. Yeah, this will take the rest of the time. So I noticed some good parallelisms with Morpheus and Euripides and going down to hell to grab his wife. And in that state, you don't remember who you are. And he was to not look back or not look at distractions. And I find that very interesting to Saul and Lot. I mean, Lot, his wife, Old Testament, his wife looked back. So is there some kind of discipline to integrating yourself? You're talking about there's some kind of integration as a goal for IFS. So is there like a discipline for that?
A discipline for integrating?
Yeah.
Like, are you asking like for a specific process for doing that?
What do you think that might be?
Yeah, IFS therapy. Yeah. I think that if you're asking like, how do you identify all the parts and then integrate them, I think that is not potentially impossible to do outside of therapy. And certainly,
Dan, is it even possible to do IFS and not look back? Because some therapies you don't really look too
Oh.
far into the back,
oh,
but
absolutely.
can you do IFS without looking back?
No,
Yeah.
not at all.
I think they have to do with distraction.
Sure. No further comment. We can talk more after.
Yeah,
like.
yeah.
All right, cool. So that was the end of our talk, but on your way out, please see Ed because we have ribbons for you to commemorate. But you gotta dance on the way out, okay?
It's
Commemorate the choreography and Merriment Ball. Woo!
y'all were the first annual participants. Y'all are honored to be here.